Commander Sarah Chun had seen many strange things in her 15 years serving aboard the Starship Horizon, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The diplomatic meeting hall fell silent as I turned toward the small purple-skinned girl who had just spoken those impossible words. "Mom, that's my father." The child couldn't be more than 8 years old by human standards, though with the Zephyrian species, it was always difficult to tell. Her large violet eyes sparkled with innocent joy as she pointed directly at Captain Marcus Webb, the human delegation leader, who sat frozen in his chair. Ambassador Kelthera, the Zephyrian representative, and apparently the child's mother, went completely still. Her usually graceful movements ceased entirely, and the soft, bioluminescent patterns that typically danced across her skin dimmed to almost nothing. The other Zephyrian officials around the table showed similar reactions, their own skin patterns flickering in what Sarah recognized as extreme shock. Captain Webb himself looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His face had gone pale, and he gripped the edge of the conference table so hard his knuckles were white. Sarah noticed his breathing had become shallow and rapid. "I'm sorry," Webb said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Could you repeat that?" The little girl giggled, a sound like tiny bells that would have been adorable in any other circumstance. "You're my daddy. Mommy showed me your picture lots of times. She said you had to go away before I was born, but that maybe someday we'd see you again." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could hear the soft hum of the ship's life support systems, the distant murmur of conversations from other parts of the vessel, even the quiet breathing of the dozen people seated around the table. But nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. The Zephyrians were one of humanity's newest allies, contact having been established only 3 years ago. Their home system was rich in rare minerals that human technology desperately needed, while humans possessed advanced terraforming techniques that could help expand Zephyrian colonies. The current negotiations were meant to solidify a long-term trade agreement that would benefit both species greatly. But this changed everything. Ambassador Kelthera finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Zara, please return to our quarters. The adults need to discuss some important matters." "But, Mom," the girl protested, her violet eyes wide with confusion. "Don't you want to talk to Daddy? You always said you missed him so much." "Zara, please." Kelthera's tone carried a weight that even the child couldn't ignore. The little girl's face fell, her excitement deflating like a punctured balloon. She looked between her mother and Webb with obvious disappointment before slowly walking toward the exit. As she passed Webb's chair, she paused and reached out to touch his hand with one small purple finger. "I'm really happy to meet you, Daddy," she said softly. "I hope we can play together soon." Webb stared down at the tiny hand touching his, and Sarah saw tears beginning to form in his eyes. Yes, sweetheart. Me too." The child beamed at him one more time before skipping out of the room, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt like a physical presence. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the expedition's xenobiologist, was the first to break the silence. Her scientific mind was already working through the implications, though her voice was gentle. "Captain Webb, I need to ask, when you were last in Zephyrian space, did you have any personal contact with Zephyrian individuals?" Webb's laugh was bitter and hollow. 3.5 years ago, I was a junior officer on the exploration vessel Darwin. We were part of the first human delegation to Zephyr Prime." He looked up at Kelthera, his expression a mixture of pain and wonder. "We weren't supposed to make contact with anyone outside the official delegation, but our ship had mechanical problems, and we were stranded for 2 weeks while repairs were made." Kelthera spoke for the first time since her daughter had left, her voice carefully controlled. "I was assigned as a cultural liaison to the human visitors. My role was to help them understand our customs and ensure their stay was comfortable while their vessel was repaired. We spent a lot of time together," Webb continued, his eyes never leaving Kelthera's face. "You were so patient with all my questions about your people, your world. And you were—" He paused, struggling for words. You were the most beautiful, intelligent, kind person I'd ever met. Sarah watched the exchange with growing fascination and concern. Interspecies relationships weren't unheard of among the various alien species that had made contact with humanity, but they were rare and often complicated. The fact that this particular relationship had apparently produced a child raised questions that would have far-reaching implications for both species. The regulations were very clear, Webb said, his voice growing stronger. No personal relationships with alien species during first contact situations. I knew I was breaking every protocol, but I couldn't help myself. When it came time to leave, he trailed off, shaking his head. You said goodbye, Kelthra finished softly. You said it was the hardest thing you'd ever done, but that our species were too different, that there could never be a future for us. I was an idiot, Webb said with quiet intensity. I was young and scared, and I let military regulations dictate my personal choices. I thought about you every day for months afterward, but by then, it was too late. The Darwin was reassigned to deep space exploration. I had no way to contact you, and even if I did, I didn't think you'd want to see me again. Dr. Vasquez cleared her throat gently. Captain, Ambassador, I don't mean to interrupt, but we need to address some immediate practical concerns. If that child is indeed the biological offspring of both of you, then we're looking at the first confirmed case of successful human-Zephyrian reproduction. The scientific implications alone are staggering. Admiral Morrison, the senior-most human official present, had been silent throughout the exchange, but now he leaned forward with a troubled expression. The political implications are equally significant. Captain Webb, you violated direct orders regarding contact with alien species. Under normal circumstances, this would result in court-martial and discharge. Webb straightened in his chair, his military bearing reasserting itself. Understand, sir. I'm prepared to face whatever consequences are deemed appropriate. However, Morrison continued, these are not normal circumstances. The existence of a human-Zephyrian hybrid changes everything. It proves that our species are far more compatible than anyone imagined. It also means we have responsibilities we never anticipated. Kelthra spoke up, her voice gaining strength. Zara is my daughter. I have raised her alone for over 7 years. I did not seek out this meeting to cause problems for your Captain Webb or to complicate these negotiations. When I learned that he would be part of the human delegation, I thought it would be a chance for my daughter to finally meet her father. I did not expect her to announce it so publicly. Children have a way of cutting through adult complexities, Dr. Vasquez observed with a slight smile. The question now is what we do with this information. Sarah had remained quiet during the exchange, but her strategic mind had been working through the various angles. Finally, she spoke up. With respect, sirs, I think we need to consider how this affects our current mission. These trade negotiations are critical for both our species. We can't let personal matters derail something that could benefit millions of people. Personal matters? Webb's voice carried a sharp edge. Commander Chun, with all due respect, we're talking about my daughter. A little girl I didn't even know existed until 5 minutes ago. I understand that, Captain, and I sympathize. But we're also talking about potential violations of first contact protocols, unprecedented biological discoveries, and a diplomatic situation that could either strengthen our alliance with the Zephyrians or destroy it entirely. Admiral Morrison nodded gravely. Commander Chin raises valid points. We need to approach this situation carefully. Ambassador Kelthra, how do your people view this development? Kelthra's skin patterns shifted to a deep blue color that Sarah had learned indicated serious thought. My people value family above all else. The fact that Zara exists, that she is healthy and happy, will be seen as a blessing by most Zephyrians. However, there will be some who view her human heritage with suspicion or fear. Fear of what? Webb asked. Fear of contamination, Kelthra replied honestly. Not all of my people were enthusiastic about establishing relations with humanity. Some believe that contact with your species will dilute our genetic purity or corrupt our culture. Zara's existence could be used by those factions to argue against closer ties between our peoples. Dr. Vasquez pulled up a holographic display from her tablet, showing what appeared to be genetic analysis charts. I've been reviewing our biological compatibility studies from the past 3 years. Theoretically, human Zephyrian reproduction should be impossible. Your species evolve on a completely different world under completely different conditions. The fact that it not only occurred but produced a viable, apparently healthy offspring suggests that our species share a common origin that predates our evolution on separate worlds. The implications of that statement hit the room like a thunderbolt. If humans and Zephyrians shared common ancestry, it would revolutionize understanding of galactic evolution and potentially explain why so many humanoid species existed throughout the galaxy. That's a discussion for another time, Admiral Morrison said firmly. Right now, we need to focus on the immediate situation. Captain Webb, what are your intentions regarding the child? Webb was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. Admiral, I've spent 3.5 years trying to forget about Kelthra and what we shared. I told myself it was impossible, that our differences were too great, that it was better for both of us to move on. But seeing that little girl, hearing her call me Daddy, he paused, collecting himself. She's my daughter. I can't just walk away from that, even if it means the end of your military career. Morrison asked, even if it means the end of everything else in my life, Webb replied without hesitation. Kelthra looked at him with something that might have been hope flickering in her violet eyes. Marcus, you don't understand what you're saying. Raising a child, especially one of mixed heritage, it's not easy. There are challenges you can't imagine. Then, help me understand, Webb said simply. Help me learn what I need to know to be a father to her. Sarah watched the exchange with growing respect for Captain Webb. She had served under him for 2 years and had always known him to be a dedicated officer, but this was the first time she had seen him as a man dealing with something more important than duty or protocol. There's another factor we need to consider, Sarah said carefully. The little girl, Zura, she's been living her entire life without a father, and now suddenly he's here. We need to think about what's best for her emotional development and well-being. Dr. Vasquez nodded agreement. Commander Chun is right. The psychological impact of this situation on the child needs to be our primary concern. She seemed excited to meet Captain Webb, but that could change quickly if she senses tension or conflict among the adults. Ambassador Kelthra stood slowly, her graceful movements betraying none of the turmoil that must have been churning inside her. I suggest we suspend these negotiations for today. My daughter and I need time to process what has happened, and I believe your Captain Webb needs the same. Perhaps tomorrow we can discuss how to move forward in a way that serves everyone's best interests. Admiral Morrison looked around the table, gauging the mood of his delegation. I think that's wise, Ambassador. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning. Captain Webb, you're confined to quarters pending a full review of the situation. Commander Chun, I want you to prepare a comprehensive report on the potential implications of this development for our ongoing diplomatic relations. As the officials began filing out of the conference room, Webb remained seated, staring at the spot where his daughter had been standing. Sarah lingered as well, watching him with concern. Captain, she said gently, are you all right? Webb looked up at her, and she saw that the tears he had been holding back were now flowing freely down his face. Sarah, I have a daughter, a beautiful little girl who's been growing up without me for 7 years. How do I even begin to make up for that? One day at a time, Sarah replied softly, and maybe by being the best father you can be from this moment forward. Webb nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. I know this complicates things for the mission, for the crew, for everyone. I'm sorry for that. Don't apologize for having a family, Sarah said firmly. We'll figure out the rest as we go. As Webb finally left the conference room, Sarah remained behind, staring out the large viewport at the stars beyond. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, difficult decisions, and consequences that none of them could fully predict. But tonight, somewhere on this ship, A little girl was probably going to sleep happy because she had finally met her father. And sometimes, Sarah reflected, that was the most important thing in the universe. Commander Sarah Chun woke to the soft chime of her comm unit at 0630 hours, 2 hours earlier than her usual wake-up call. The message was from Admiral Morrison, requesting her immediate presence in his ready room. She dressed quickly and made her way through the ship's corridors, noting the unusual tension in the air. Word of yesterday's revelation had clearly spread through the crew, despite attempts to keep it classified. Morrison was standing at his viewport when she arrived, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the Zephyrian fleet that hung in space alongside the horizon. 3 elegant ships with flowing, organic lines that looked more grown than built. "Sir, you wanted to see me?" "Sarah, we have a problem. I've been in communication with Earth Command since 0400 hours. The preliminary report I sent has caused quite a stir back home." He turned to face her, and she could see the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. There are factions within the Colonial Senate who view this development as either a golden opportunity or a catastrophic threat. Neither perspective is particularly helpful right now. Sarah took a seat at the small conference table. "What kind of opportunity, sir?" "Some see Captain Webb's daughter as proof that humans and Zephyrians are meant to be allies, possibly even one people. They're already talking about accelerated integration programs, joint colonies, even eventual species merger." Morrison's tone made clear what he thought of such ideas. "Others see her as evidence that our species are too compatible, that contact will lead to the dilution of human genetic integrity." And the threat perspective? They're concerned that this proves first contact protocols can be easily compromised by personal relationships. There's talk of implementing much stricter separation policies for all future alien contact situations. Some are even suggesting we should pull back from the Zephyrian alliance entirely. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Sir, that would be catastrophic. We need the mineral resources from their system, and they need our terraforming technology. Both species would suffer. I know that. You know that. But politicians and bureaucrats see everything through the lens of potential problems rather than actual solutions." Morrison activated his desk display, showing a series of communication logs. "I've got senators demanding Captain Webb be court-martialed as an example, others wanting him promoted as a hero of interspecies cooperation. Meanwhile, the scientists are practically salivating at the opportunity to study a human-Zephyrian hybrid. What about the little girl in all of this?" "Zara." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "That's why I wanted to talk to you, Sarah. You have a reputation for seeing the human element in complex situations. I need someone I trust to assess this family dynamic and help me figure out the best path forward." Before Sarah could respond, her comm unit chimed with an incoming message. The display showed it was from Ambassador Kelthra, requesting a private meeting with her specifically. Sarah showed the message to Morrison, who raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. The ambassador wants to talk to you. Not me or Captain Webb. I wonder what that's about." "Only one way to find out, sir." An hour later, Sarah found herself in one of the ship's smaller conference rooms, sitting across from Ambassador Kelthra. The Zephyrian woman looked tired, the usual vibrant patterns on her skin subdued and flickering irregularly. It was, Sarah had learned, a sign of emotional distress among her people. "Thank you for meeting with me, Commander Chun," Kelthra said, her accented English carrying a musical quality that was common among Zephyrians. "I needed to speak with someone who is not directly involved in yesterday's revelation." "I'm happy to help if I can, Ambassador. Though I should point out that as Captain Webb's second-in-command, I am somewhat involved." Kelthra nodded. "Yes, but you're not emotionally compromised as Marcus is, nor are you bound by political considerations as Admiral Morrison is. I need someone who can think clearly about what is best for my daughter." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about Zara. What has her life been like?" A genuine smile crossed Kelthra's features for the first time since the meeting began. "She is remarkable, Commander. Intelligent, curious, brave kind. She has grown up knowing that her father was human, but not knowing his identity. I told her stories about him, Showed her pictures from our time together. Perhaps I was wrong to do so, but I wanted her to understand that she was created from love, not from mere biological curiosity. You weren't wrong, Sarah said firmly. Every child deserves to know they are loved and wanted. When I learned that Marcus would be part of this delegation, I wrestled with whether to tell Zara. In the end, I decided that she had a right to meet her father, even if it was only once. I never imagined she would be so direct in her announcement. Sarah couldn't help but smile. Children often are. It's one of their most endearing and terrifying qualities. Commander, I need you to understand something about Zephyrian culture. Family bonds are sacred to us. The connection between parent and child is considered the most important relationship in existence. When Zara publicly acknowledged Marcus as her father, she created a bond that cannot be easily broken in our society. What does that mean, practically speaking? Kelthra's skin patterns shifted to a deeper blue, indicating serious thought. It means that Marcus is now considered Zara's father not just biologically, but socially and legally as well. If he walks away from her now, it would be seen as an abandonment so severe that it would damage not just his reputation, but potentially the relationship between our species. Sarah felt the weight of that revelation. And if he doesn't walk away, then he must be prepared to truly become a father, to learn our ways, to understand what Zara needs, to commit to her well-being above his own convenience. Kelthra paused. Commander, I need to know if Marcus is capable of that commitment. Ambassador, I've served under Captain Webb for 2 years. He's one of the most dedicated, reliable people I've ever known. When he commits to something, he follows through completely. But this is not a military mission or a professional obligation. This is about loving a child who is not entirely human, who's been raised in a culture he barely understands, who has needs and challenges he cannot imagine. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. May I ask you something personal, Ambassador? Please, do you still have feelings for Captain Webb? Kelthra's skin patterns shifted to a soft purple color that Sarah didn't recognize. Commander, what Marcus and I shared 3.5 years ago was intense. We were two people from different worlds who found something beautiful together. But we are not the same people we were then. I have spent 7 years raising a child alone, learning to be strong and independent. He has spent those same years advancing his career and serving his species. Whether those feelings still exist, or whether they could be rebuilt, is a question I cannot answer. But you're willing to find out? For Zara's sake, yes. She deserves to have both her parents in her life, if it's possible. But I will not sacrifice her emotional well-being for adult romantic complications. Sarah nodded with respect. That's very wise. Ambassador, if I may suggest something? Please. I think Captain Webb, you, and Zara need time together away from all the political pressure and diplomatic complications. Maybe we could arrange some informal time for the three of you to get to know each other again without the weight of interspecies relations on your shoulders. Kelthra considered this. That might be beneficial. But, Commander, there is something else you need to know. There are members of my delegation who are not pleased with this development. Some view Zara's mixed heritage as a complication that could undermine our negotiations with humanity. What kind of complication? There are those among my people who believe that closer ties with humanity will eventually lead to the end of pure Zephyrian culture and genetics. They see Zara as proof that contact with humans is dangerous to our species' integrity. Kelthra's expression grew troubled. I have received several messages since yesterday, suggesting that perhaps it would be better if Zara's parentage remained unclear. Sarah felt a surge of protective anger. Ambassador, are you saying that some of your people would want to deny Zara her heritage? Not deny it, but perhaps minimize its significance. Treat it as a biological curiosity rather than a family relationship. That's unacceptable. Zara is a child who has the right to know and be loved by both her parents. I agree completely, Commander. But I wanted you to understand the pressures we are facing. There are those on both sides who would prefer that this family relationship disappear for the sake of political convenience. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Sarah's comm unit. A message appeared from Dr. Vasquez requesting both women's presence in her laboratory. The subject line simply read, "Urgent, Zara's medical scans." 20 minutes later, Sarah and Kelthera found themselves in the ship's advanced medical laboratory, where Dr. Vasquez was reviewing holographic displays showing complex genetic and physiological data. Captain Webb was already there, looking pale and concerned. "Doctor, what did you find?" Sarah asked. "Something remarkable," Dr. Vasquez replied, her scientific excitement barely contained. "I ran comprehensive scans on Zara yesterday, with Ambassador Kelthera's permission. What I discovered challenges everything we thought we knew about interspecies biology." The holographic display shifted to show a representation of Zara's genetic structure. This child is not simply a hybrid with mixed traits for both parents. Her genetics show active integration at the cellular level. Human and Zephyrian DNA are not just coexisting, they're actively cooperating and enhancing each other. Webb moved closer to the display. "What does that mean for her health?" "It means she's potentially healthier and more capable than either pure human or pure Zephyrian children. Her immune system shows resistance to diseases that affect both species. Her neurological development indicates enhanced cognitive abilities. Her physical structure suggests she could survive comfortably in a much wider range of environments than either parent species." Kelthera stared at the data with wonder. "You're saying that mixed heritage makes her stronger, not weaker?" "Much stronger. And there's more." Dr. Vasquez manipulated the display to show cellular regeneration patterns. "Her healing capabilities are significantly enhanced. What might take weeks for a human or Zephyrian to recover from, she could heal in days. Her lifespan could potentially be much longer than either parent species." Sarah watched Webb's face as he processed this information. She could see the pride and amazement warring with concern and responsibility. "Doctor, are there any negative effects? Any health risks we should be aware of?" Webb asked. "That's the remarkable thing. I can't find any. It's as if human and Zephyrian genetics were designed to complement each other perfectly." Which brings up some very interesting questions about the evolution of both species. A new voice cut through their discussion. Questions that could reshape our understanding of the entire galaxy. They turned to see Admiral Morrison entering the laboratory, followed by an elderly Zephyrian that Sarah didn't recognize. The newcomer was clearly quite old, with deep lines around his eyes and skin patterns that had faded to pale silver. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Senior Archivist Vorthak. He's the keeper of historical records for the Zephyrian people, and he has some very interesting information to share with us." Vorthak stepped forward, moving slowly but with dignity. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years and wisdom. "I've spent the last 18 hours reviewing our most ancient archives, records that date back to the earliest days of our civilization. What I found there may explain why this child exists and why her genetics are so perfectly integrated." He activated a small device that projected holographic images into the air above them. The images showed star maps, ancient symbols, and what appeared to be historical documents. "According to our oldest legends, our people were not native to Zephyr Prime. We came from somewhere else, somewhere distant, fleeing a great catastrophe that destroyed our original homeworld. These legends speak of others who fled in different directions, others who shared our origin, but became separated across the galaxy." The implications hit the room like a physical force. Sarah heard Webb's sharp intake of breath, saw Kelthera's skin patterns shift to bright gold, a color indicating profound revelation among her people. "You're suggesting that humans and Zephyrians share a common origin?" Dr. Vasquez asked, her scientific mind racing through the possibilities. "More than suggesting," Vorthak replied. "I believe the evidence is now overwhelming. Zara's existence, her genetic integration, the compatibility of our species, these are not coincidences. They are the result of shared ancestry, of two branches of the same evolutionary tree finally reuniting after millennia of separation. Webb found his voice first. If this is true, if our species are actually related, then what does that mean for her? For all of us? It means, Vorthak said with a gentle smile, that your daughter is not an impossible anomaly. She is a bridge between two parts of the same family, reunited at last. She represents not the dilution of either species, but the restoration of what was lost long ago. Kelthera stepped forward, her voice full of emotion. Marcus, do you understand what this means? Our relationship, our daughter, they're not violations of natural law. They're the universe correcting an ancient separation. Webb looked at the genetic displays, at the ancient star maps, at the woman he had loved and lost, and finally, at the data representing his remarkable daughter. It means I'm not going to let anyone or anything separate me from my family again. Admiral Morrison nodded approvingly. Captain Webb, I'm officially assigning you to permanent liaison duty with the Zephyrian delegation. Consider it a promotion with an indefinite assignment. As the group began discussing the implications of these revelations, Sarah watched Webb and Kelthera standing together, looking at the holographic representation of their daughter's genetics. For the first time since this crisis began, she felt hope that everything might work out after all. Somewhere on the ship, a 7-year-old girl was probably playing, unaware that she had just become the living proof that two ancient civilizations were actually one people, finally coming home. 3 days had passed since the revelation about Zara's parentage and the stunning discovery of humanity and Zephyrian shared origins. The diplomatic negotiations had been temporarily suspended while both delegations processed the implications of these developments. But Sarah Chin knew that the real work was happening in the smaller, more personal meetings taking place throughout the ship. She was making her way to the observation deck when she heard the sound of laughter echoing from the recreational area. Following the sound, she discovered Captain Webb sitting on the floor with his daughter, both of them surrounded by what appeared to be a complex construction made of colorful blocks and mechanical components. "Daddy, you're not doing it right," Zara giggled, her violet eyes sparkling with amusement. "The stabilizer goes on the bottom, not the top." Webb studied the strange contraption with the serious concentration of a military engineer. "Are you sure?" "According to the basic principles of structural engineering." "Trust me," Zara interrupted with the absolute confidence that only children possess. "I built lots of these. Mom taught me how when I was little." Sarah watched from the doorway as Webb carefully repositioned the component according to his daughter's instructions. When he activated the device, it immediately began floating in a stable hover pattern, its internal lights pulsing in a rhythmic sequence that seemed almost musical. "How did you know that would work?" Webb asked, genuinely amazed. "I can feel it," Zara said simply. "When something is put together wrong, it feels itchy. When it's right, it feels happy." Dr. Vasquez emerged from the shadows behind Sarah, having apparently been watching the interaction as well. "Fascinating," she murmured quietly. "Enhanced spatial and mechanical intuition. It's another manifestation of her hybrid genetics." Sarah turned to the doctor with a questioning look. "Enhanced how?" "Watch this," Vasquez whispered, then stepped into the recreational area. "Hello, Zara. That's a very impressive floating sculpture you've built." The little girl beamed at the praise. "Thank you. Daddy helped, but he needed lots of direction." "I can see that," Vasquez smiled. "Zara, I have a puzzle I've been working on in my laboratory. It's quite difficult, and I can't seem to solve it. Would you mind taking a look? Can Daddy come too?" "Of course." 20 minutes later, the group was standing in Dr. Vasquez's laboratory, staring at a complex, three-dimensional puzzle that had been occupying the ship's top engineers for weeks. It was a Zephyrian artifact recovered from an ancient site, consisting of dozens of interlocking crystalline components that needed to be arranged in a specific pattern to unlock its secrets. "Our best computer simulations estimate there are over 14 million possible combinations," Vasquez explained. "We've been working through them systematically, but at our current rate, it would take approximately 18 months to solve." Zara studied the puzzle for less than 30 seconds before reaching out and beginning to manipulate the components. Her small hands moved with startling confidence, rotating and repositioning crystals with fluid precision. As she worked, the crystals began to glow with increasing intensity. "Zara," Webb said carefully, "are you sure you know what you're doing?" "It wants to be this way," she replied, not looking up from her work. "Can't you feel it singing?" Webb and Vasquez exchanged glances. Neither of them could hear anything except the soft humming of laboratory equipment. Within 5 minutes, Zara had completely reconfigured the puzzle. As she positioned the final crystal, the entire artifact blazed with brilliant light and began projecting a holographic star map into the space above them. "By the depths," whispered a new voice from the laboratory entrance. They turned to see Senior Archivist Vorthak standing in the doorway, his aged features filled with wonder. "Child, do you know what you have just accomplished?" Zara looked up at the elderly Zephyrian with curiosity. "I fixed the broken song. It was sad before, but now it's happy." Vorthak moved closer to examine the holographic display, his excitement growing as he studied the stellar formations shown in the projection. "This is a map to the original homeworld, the world our species shared before the Great Separation. We have spent thousands of years trying to decode this artifact, and you solved it in moments." Webb knelt beside his daughter, his voice gentle but concerned. "Zara, how did you know how to do that?" The little girl tilted her head, considering the question with the seriousness that children sometimes bring to adult concerns. "The crystals were lonely, Daddy. They want to talk to each other, but they were pointing in the wrong directions. I just helped them find each other again." Dr. Vasquez was frantically taking readings from the activated artifact, her excitement barely contained. "The energy signatures coming from this device are unlike anything we've seen. It's not just showing us a star map. It's actively scanning local space, looking for something." "Looking for what?" Sarah asked. Before anyone could answer, the ship's communication system activated with an urgent tone. Admiral Morrison's voice filled the laboratory. "All senior staff to the bridge immediately. We have an incoming transmission from an unknown source." The bridge was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Officers moved between stations with a controlled urgency that marked a significant development. Admiral Morrison stood at the center of it all, his expression grim as he studied the main view screen. "Admiral, what's the situation?" Sarah asked. "We started receiving this transmission approximately 10 minutes ago," Morrison replied. "It's coming from a sector of space that our charts show as empty. No planets, no stations, no known civilizations." The view screen activated, showing what appeared to be a figure in a sophisticated environmental suit. The being was clearly humanoid, but there was something indefinably different about their proportions and movements. When the figure spoke, their voice was transmitted through universal translators that struggled to render the alien language into understandable words. "Greetings, children of the scattered people. We have felt the awakening of the ancient beacon, the song that calls the lost tribes home. We are the keepers, the watchers who remained behind to guide the return when the time was right." The transmission continued, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as the implications became clear. "We have preserved the knowledge, the technology, the history of what came before the scattering. We have waited for the signs that the separation was ending, that the divided children were ready to reunite." Captain Webb stepped forward, his hand resting protectively on Zara's shoulder. "Admiral, are they saying what I think they're saying?" "It appears so, Captain. Ladies and gentlemen, we may have just made contact with representatives of the original civilization that spawned both humanity and the Zephyrians." Ambassador Kelthera moved to stand beside Webb, and Zara, her skin patterns displaying a complex mixture of awe and apprehension. "The legends speak of the Keepers, those who chose to remain behind when the evacuation began. We thought they were myths." The transmission continued, and the Keeper's next words sent shockwaves through the assembled group. "We have monitored your progress, your growth, your eventual rediscovery of each other. The child who activated the beacon, she who carries the blood of both divided lines. She is the sign we have waited for. The bridge between worlds, the herald of reunion. All eyes turned to Zara, who seemed remarkably calm considering that she had apparently just been identified as some kind of prophesied figure by an ancient alien civilization. "Does this mean I'm important?" she asked innocently. "Sweetheart," Webb said softly, "you've always been important. But, yes, it seems like you might be very special to a lot of people." The Keeper continued speaking, and their words carried implications that would reshape galactic civilization. "We extend an invitation to the reunited children to come home and reclaim the knowledge that was lost in the scattering. But know that this knowledge comes with responsibility. You will learn of technologies beyond your current understanding, of the true history of your people, of the threat that originally forced the evacuation." Admiral Morrison stepped forward to address the transmission directly. "We are honored by your contact and your invitation. However, we will need time to consider the implications of what you're offering." "Time you shall have," the Keeper replied. "But know that others heard the beacon as well. Others who were not part of the original evacuation, who view the reunification as a threat to their own dominance of this region of space. The scattering was not just an escape from catastrophe. It was also a hiding. You have now announced your existence to those who would prefer you remained lost." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sarah looked around at the faces of her colleagues and saw her own thoughts reflected in their expressions. In the span of a few days, they had gone from routine diplomatic negotiations to the discovery of shared ancestry, to contact with an ancient civilization, to warnings about unknown enemies. "Admiral," she said carefully, "I think we need to convene an emergency meeting with both delegations. The scope of this situation has grown far beyond anything we were prepared for." Morrison nodded grimly. "Agreed. But first, I want a full analysis of that transmission. Where exactly did it come from? How did they know about the beacon being activated? And, most importantly, who are these others they warned us about?" Dr. Vasquez stepped forward with her tablet, which was displaying tracking data from the ship's sensors. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the transmission source. The signal originated from a point in space approximately 47 light-years from our current position. But here's the strange part. There's nothing there according to our sensors. Nothing. No planetas, no ships, no artificial structures. Yet the transmission definitely came from those coordinates." Vorthak spoke up from where he had been quietly observing the proceedings. "The ancient texts speak of hidden sanctuaries, places where the Keepers maintain their watch while remaining invisible to those who might seek to harm them. It is possible they possess technology that allows them to exist in our reality while remaining undetectable." Webb looked down at his daughter, who was now holding her mother's hand while watching the adult discussions with the serious attention that children sometimes display when they sense that important things are happening around them. "What does this mean for Zura?" he asked quietly. "They specifically mentioned her, called her some kind of herald. I won't let her become a political or religious symbol for anyone." Kelthera squeezed his arm gently. "Marcus, I share your concerns. But we must also consider that she may have abilities and insights that could benefit everyone. The way she solved that ancient puzzle, her intuitive understanding of complex systems, these are gifts that could help our people navigate whatever challenges are coming." "She's 7 years old," Webb replied firmly. "Whatever gift she has, whatever role she might play in the future, right now she's a little girl who needs to be protected and loved, not thrust into the spotlight as some kind of galactic savior." Sarah watched the exchange with growing respect for both parents. Despite the overwhelming implications of recent events, they were keeping their daughter's welfare as their primary concern. "If I may suggest something," Sarah said, "perhaps we should establish a protected environment for Zara where she can continue to develop naturally while also having access to the resources and education she'll need to understand her unique capabilities." Admiral Morrison nodded approvingly. "That's sound thinking, Commander. Captain Webb, I'm assigning you to head up a new joint task force focused on understanding and protecting children of mixed heritage." Ambassador Kelthera, Would your people be willing to participate in such an endeavor? I believe they would, Kelthra replied, especially given the implications of these recent discoveries. Their discussion was interrupted by another urgent communication from the ship's sensor array. Lieutenant Torres, the tactical officer, looked up from her station with a troubled expression. Admiral, we're detecting multiple energy signatures approaching our position. Configuration and technology are unknown, but they're moving fast and appear to be on an intercept course. How long until they reach us? At their current speed, approximately 6 hours. Morrison's expression hardened as the reality of their situation became clear. The mysterious others that the Keeper had warned them about were apparently already on their way. Red alert. All hands to battle stations. Commander Chun, I want you to coordinate with the Zephyrian fleet. If we're going to face unknown hostiles, we'll need to work together. As the bridge erupted into controlled activity, Sarah caught sight of Zara watching everything with wide eyes. The little girl who had innocently revealed her parentage just days ago had somehow become the focal point of events that would reshape the galaxy. But right now, she was still just a child who needed her parents. And as Sarah watched Webb and Kelthra moved to shelter their daughter from the chaos around them, she realized that perhaps that simple truth was more important than all the cosmic implications surrounding them. The real test was about to begin. The approaching fleet was unlike anything in the databases of either human or Zephyrian military forces. As they drew closer, their ships resolved into massive, angular constructs that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The vessels moved with predatory grace, their formation suggesting both advanced tactical planning and hostile intent. Commander Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the horizon, watching the tactical displays with growing unease. Beside her, Captain Webb maintained his post despite Admiral Morrison's suggestion that he might want to be with his family during the crisis. "Sir, with respect, my duty is to this ship and crew," Webb had said when Morrison offered him the option to stand down. "My family is safer if I'm doing my job properly." Now, as the unknown fleet closed to within weapons range, Sarah was grateful for his presence. Webb was one of the finest tactical officers in the fleet, and they would need every advantage they could get. "Admiral," Lieutenant Torres called from her station, "the unknown vessels are hailing us. Audio only. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was cold, mechanical, completely lacking in warmth or recognizable emotion. "Vessels of the scattered tribes, you will surrender the Beacon Awakener immediately. Resistance will result in the destruction of your ships and the elimination of all aboard." Admiral Morrison stepped forward, his voice steady despite the obvious threat. "This is Admiral Morrison of the United Earth Vessel Horizon. The person you're referring to is under our protection. We will not surrender anyone to an unknown force that approaches with obvious hostile intent. Your protection is irrelevant. The awakening of the beacon threatens the stability of this sector. The hybrid offspring represents a contamination that must be eliminated before it can spread. You have one standard time unit to comply." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Sarah felt a cold fury building in her chest. These beings, whoever they were, had just threatened to murder a 7-year-old child. "Admiral," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "I recommend we reject their ultimatum entirely." "Agreed," Morrison replied. "All ships prepare for combat. Commander Chun, coordinate with the Zephyrian vessels. Captain Webb, I want our best defensive strategy." Webb was already analyzing the tactical situation, his fingers flying over the control interface. "Sir, we're outgunned approximately 3-1, but their formation suggests they're not used to facing coordinated resistance. If we can get the Zephyrian ships to work in concert with our maneuvering capabilities." His strategic planning was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Zephyrian flagship. Ambassador Kelthra appeared on the main screen, but she was no longer in her diplomatic robes. Instead, she wore what appeared to be military armor, her skin patterns now displaying the bold crimson and gold colors that Sarah had learned indicated a Zephyrian in full combat readiness. "Admiral Morrison, Captain Webb, Kelthera said, her voice carrying a new edge of authority. I should have mentioned earlier that my diplomatic credentials are not my only qualifications. I hold the rank of Fleet Commander in the Zephyrian Defense Forces. Webb stared at the screen with obvious surprise. You never mentioned you were military. It did not seem relevant to our diplomatic mission. Kelthera replied with a slight smile that held no humor. But it is very relevant now. These attackers call themselves the Hegemony. They are a coalition of species who dominate this region of space through force and intimidation. They view any potential challenges to their power as threats to be eliminated. How do you know about them? Morrison asked. Because they have been harassing Zephyrian colonies for the past 50 years. We have fought them before, though never in such numbers. They fear the reunification of the scattered tribes because it would create a power block capable of challenging their dominance. Dr. Vasquez's voice came over the ship's communication system from her laboratory. Admiral, I'm reading massive energy spikes from the ancient artifact that Zara activated. It's reacting to the presence of the Hegemony ships. Before anyone could respond to that information, a new development demanded their immediate attention. The space around the human and Zephyrian fleets began to shimmer with strange distortions, and suddenly, 3 massive vessels materialized as if emerging from invisible hiding places. These new ships were completely different from the Hegemony vessels. Where the attackers' ships absorbed light, these newcomers seemed to generate it, their hulls covered in flowing patterns of luminescence that shifted and danced like living aurora. This is Keeper Valdris of the Sanctuary Fleet, a new voice announced over the communication system. Hegemony forces, you are in violation of the ancient accords. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The response from the Hegemony was swift and violent. Their lead ship fired a weapon that tore through space itself, creating a rippling distortion that slammed into one of the Keeper vessels. The impact should have been devastating, but the Keeper ship absorbed the attack completely, its luminescent patterns merely shifting to accommodate the energy. So much for diplomatic solutions, Morrison muttered. All ships engage the enemy. Protect the Keeper vessels if possible, but our primary objective is to ensure the safety of our own people. The battle that followed was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. The Hegemony ships fought with brutal efficiency, their weapons designed to overwhelm and destroy. The human and Zephyrian vessels worked together with growing coordination, their different technological approaches complementing each other in ways that surprised everyone. But it was the Keeper ships that truly turned the tide. Their weapons didn't just destroy Hegemony vessels. They seemed to unmake them, causing the enemy ships to simply cease to exist rather than exploding in conventional fashion. Throughout the battle, Sarah found herself thinking about Zara, safely sheltered in the ship's most protected section with a full security detail. The little girl who had innocently revealed her parentage had somehow become the catalyst for a conflict that would reshape the balance of power in this region of space. The tide of battle shifted when the ancient artifact in Dr. Vasquez's laboratory began projecting a new holographic display. This time, instead of a star map, it showed real-time tactical information about the Hegemony ships, their weak points, their weapon capabilities, their defensive systems. All ships, Morrison announced, were receiving enhanced targeting data. Adjust your attack patterns according to the information being transmitted from the artifact. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Human and Zephyrian weapons that had been largely ineffective against Hegemony shielding suddenly began finding their marks with devastating accuracy. Within minutes, the attacking force was in full retreat, their remaining ships fleeing back into the depths of space. As the immediate threat receded, the Keeper ship that had first materialized moved closer to the horizon. Keeper Valdris requested permission to come aboard, along with a small diplomatic party. An hour later, Sarah found herself in the ship's main conference room, surrounded by the most remarkable gathering she had ever witnessed. Admiral Morrison and Captain Webb represented humanity, Ambassador Kelthera and her senior staff represented the Zephyrians, and 3 figures in elegant environmental suits represented the Keepers. At the center of it all sat a 7-year-old girl with purple skin and violet eyes, completely unaware that she had just become the most important person in several star systems. The artifact responds to her presence, Keeper Valdris explained, their voice carrying harmonics that suggested great age and wisdom. She is what we have been waiting for, the bridge between the scattered tribes, the one whose existence proves that reunification is not only possible, but inevitable. Webb leaned forward, his protective instincts clearly aroused. With respect, Keeper Valdris, what exactly does that mean for my daughter? What are you asking of her? We ask nothing that she is not already freely giving, Valdris replied. Her existence, her unique genetics, her intuitive understanding of ancient technology. These things will help guide both your species back to their full potential. But she will remain a child with parents who love her, with a normal life as much as circumstances allow. Kelthra spoke up from her position beside Webb. The hegemony will return. They will not accept defeat easily, and they now know that the reunification has begun. What protection can you offer? We offer knowledge, Valdris said. The location of the original homeworld, the technology that was lost during the scattering, the history of what came before. Your people are ready to reclaim their inheritance. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her tablet, where she had been reviewing data from the recent battle. The tactical information provided by the artifact was incredibly precise. It knew the hegemony ship's vulnerabilities better than their own crews probably did. How is that possible? Because we built those ships, Valdris replied matter-of-factly. The hegemony are not conquerors in the traditional sense. They are our children, created and abandoned when the scattering began. We left them behind to maintain control of this region. But over the millennia, they have forgotten their purpose and become exactly what we sought to escape, a force of domination and oppression. The implications of that revelation hung heavy in the room. Sarah realized that what they had just experienced was not just a battle between different species, but a family conflict on a cosmic scale. So what happens now? Sarah asked. Valdris turned their attention to Zara, who had been quietly listening to the adult conversation while drawing pictures on a tablet her mother had given her. Now, young bridge builder, you and your families have a choice to make. You can return to your separate worlds and continue as you have, knowing what you now know. Or you can accept our guidance and begin the journey home to reclaim what was lost. Zara looked up from her drawing, her violet eyes serious in the way that only children could achieve when addressing adult concerns. Will there be more fighting? Will more people get hurt? There may be, Valdris admitted honestly. The path to reunification will not be easy. But without it, the fighting will continue anyway, and eventually the hegemony will grow strong enough to threaten all the scattered tribes. Zara considered this with a careful deliberation that had already impressed every adult who had interacted with her. Finally, she looked at her parents. Mom, Daddy, what do you think we should do? Webb and Kelthra exchanged glances, and Sarah saw something pass between them, understanding, trust, and perhaps the rekindling of something deeper. Sweetheart, Webb said gently, that's a very big decision. Maybe too big for any one person to make alone. But not too big for a family to make together, Kelthra added, taking his hand. Admiral Morrison stood slowly, the weight of command evident in his movements. I think we need to contact Earth Command and the Zephyrian High Council. This situation has grown far beyond the scope of our original mission. Agreed, Kelthra said. But, Admiral, I want to make something clear. Whatever decisions are made about the larger implications of these events, my primary concern is my daughter's welfare. I will not allow her to become a political symbol or a tool for anyone's agenda. Absolutely not, Webb agreed firmly. She's a little girl first, everything else second. Keeper Valdris seemed to nod approvingly, though their environmental suit made it difficult to read their expressions. This is wisdom. The greatest victories of our ancient civilization came not from grand gestures or cosmic strategies, but from parents who loved their children and protected them while still allowing them to grow and explore their potential. As the meeting continued, Sarah found herself watching the family dynamic that was still forming between Webb, Kelthra, and Zura. Despite all the cosmic implications surrounding them, they were still just two people trying to figure out how to raise a remarkable child together. Later that evening, after the formal meetings had concluded and the immediate crisis had passed, Sarah found herself in the observation lounge watching the stars. The keeper vessels hung in space nearby, their luminescent hulls painting the darkness with gentle light. Webb appeared beside her, looking exhausted, but more at peace than she had seen him since this whole situation began. "How are you holding up, Marcus?" she asked. "I have a daughter," he said simply. 3 days ago, I thought I was just a career officer on a routine diplomatic mission. Now I discover I'm a father, that my daughter is some kind of genetic miracle, that humanity and the Zephyrians are related, and that we're all caught up in an ancient conflict that spans multiple civilizations. "That's quite a week," Sarah observed with dry humor. "The strange thing is," Webb continued, "none of the cosmic stuff matters as much as the simple fact that I have a little girl who needs me. When she called me daddy, when she touched my hand, everything else became secondary." "And Kelthra?" Webb was quiet for a long moment. "We're taking things slowly. We're not the same people we were 3.5 years ago. But we both love Zara, and we both want what's best for her. That's a good starting point for rebuilding a relationship, for building a family, which may be the most important thing we can do, regardless of what else is happening around us." Through the observation port, they watched as small transport vessels began moving between the human, Zephyrian, and Keeper ships, the beginning of cultural and technological exchange that would reshape 3 civilizations. But in the ship's residential section, a 7-year-old girl with purple skin and violet eyes was probably getting ready for bed, secure in the knowledge that both her parents loved her. And in the grand scheme of cosmic events and galactic politics, that simple truth remained the most important thing of all. The galaxy was changing, ancient enemies were stirring, and the scattered tribes were finally beginning their journey home. But at the heart of it all was something that had always been true and always would be, that love, family, and the bond between parents and children were the strongest forces in the universe. As Sarah watched Webb return to his quarters to help tuck his daughter into bed, she reflected that sometimes the smallest moments contained the greatest victories. The little alien girl had smiled and called him daddy, and in doing so had set in motion events that would echo across the stars for generations to come. But tonight, she was just a child being loved by her parents. And perhaps that was the most human story of all.